The Broncos lost on some bullshit. Pardon my language. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, we are going to have to address Garrett Bowles, affectionately referred to as Garrett Holds by the people who love him most. People who hate him on the internet. First now, a word from our sponsor. Garrett Bowles was called for 5 holding penalties in 1 game. Yeah. And he should have been called for a 6th that they called on Luis Vasquez, who is a player that they made up so they didn't have to call another holding penalty on Garrett Bowles. This week, Vic Fangio was asked about Garrett Bowles' inability to play the position that he plays.
I think he suffers from, he thinks he's in good position sometimes and dumps the guy at the end where he thinks it's a legal block. We got to do a better job of explaining that to him. He's got to do a better job of listening to the explaining.
If you can explain something to a child, you can explain it to anyone, which is why the Broncos offensive line coaches will be practicing all week on 7-year-olds so that they can later explain to Garrett Bowles how to play offensive line. Only Garrett Bowles would be the kid who sneaks off to eat all the lunches instead of listening to the offensive line coaches. Listening to the offensive line coaches.
Are these all your lunches? You mean you eat other people's lunches? Stop it!
Garrett, why did you eat all of the lunches?
Why? Why, Garrett? Why did you eat all the lunches?
He's got to do a better job of listening to the explaining.
He needs to do a better job of listening to the explaining. That's a quote. That is one hell of a quote. He needs to do a better job of listening to the explaining. That's a real sentence that came out of a head coach's mouth. Now that we've established that Garrett Bowles is stupid, we can move on to other things. The Broncos were somehow in this game late despite holding themselves back the entire game. But it turns out that even if the Broncos did somehow get a pass rush going, which they didn't really do most of the game, the refs found a way to insert themselves into the game. Thanks, refs. Really earning your paycheck out there. Can't say it enough just how much I appreciate all of the hard work and dedication you've put in to calling penalties in this game. I mean, you worked so hard, you literally found a way to change the nature of reality and then call a penalty on it. Bradley Chubb was called for roughing the passer for, and this is true, landing on the quarterback. Of course, he landed on the quarterback because he was pushed over by another offensive lineman. So it turns out that you're not allowed to rough up the passer. You're not allowed to really sack the passer unless the passer lets you sack him. Patiently, politely, and gently. Much like in Downton Abbey.
Granny, what do you think?
Oh, it is you. I thought it was a man wearing your clothes.
Yes, the Dowagers set a record for sacks that season. A record I'm not sure will ever fall. Learn the rules, Chubb. You're not allowed to sack the quarterback unless the quarterback wants to be sacked. That's called giving consent. Learn it. Also, I will say giving Mitch Trubisky 10 seconds to find a wide open receiver in the middle of the field was not a wise choice. Although he found a receiver in the middle of the field after time expired, they gave him a second back on the clock for some reason. I think because imagining you called a timeout is almost as good as actually calling a timeout, or in Chicago's case, actually as good as calling a timeout. Yeah. And of course, a team whose kicker never makes a field goal, despite who the kicker is, doesn't matter, they never make a field goal in Chicago. That guy nails one from 53. Well, that's one way to lose a game, Broncos. I guess all I can say now is that it's a good thing that the Broncos have loaded up on Super Bowl winning quarterbacks who are great at their job. That's right, Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, of course. They have all the tools necessary to come back from this. Good job, John Elway. You are truly a legend and a master of suspense. The Alfred Hitchcock of the NFL, really. That's going to do it for What the Sports. Make sure to check out this amazing deal from our sponsor.